Your one click on the subscribe button makes a huge difference. Thank you for your kind support.
Final Destination Bloodlines takes us on a terrifying journey through time as death's design spans generations, pursuing those who were never meant to exist. The sixth installment in the popular horror franchise introduces us to a new set of characters, while cleverly connecting to the series' mythology in unexpected ways. Let's dive into this tale of premonitions, family secrets, and death's relentless pursuit of those who escaped its grasp. Our story begins in 1968 at the grand opening of the Skyview Tower, an impressive high-rise restaurant with a glass dance floor. A young woman named Iris Campbell and her fiancé Paul are enjoying what should be a romantic evening. As they share an intimate moment on the observation deck, Iris experiences a sudden, terrifying vision. In her premonition, the glass floor cracks beneath partygoers, a chandelier falls, and a gas leak triggers a devastating explosion, causing the entire tower to collapse and killing everyone inside. Acting on instinct, Iris frantically warns people to leave the dance floor, screaming about the impending danger. Though most think she's crazy, her warnings save countless lives when the glass floor indeed begins to crack moments later. The staff quickly evacuates everyone and closes the restaurant for renovations, though it never reopens and is eventually demolished. Fast forward to the present day, where we meet college student Steph Reyes, who has been plagued by vivid recurring nightmares about the Skyview Tower disaster. These dreams have become so disruptive that she's falling behind in school and at risk of losing her scholarship. Her roommate Val suggests that Steph return home to get some answers, especially since she's been dreaming about someone named Iris, which happens to be her grandmother's name. Steph arrives at her childhood home, where father Marty and younger brother Charlie welcome her back. However, there's a noticeable absence. Steph's mother, Darlene, left the family when Steph was 10 years old. Hoping to learn more about her grandmother and the connection to her dreams, Steph visits her Uncle Howard and Aunt Brenda, along with her cousins Eric, Julia, and Bobby. When she inquires about Iris, she's met with uncomfortable silence and warnings to stay away from the subject. Uncle Howard reluctantly explains that Iris had severe mental health issues. After her husband died, she became paranoid and obsessive about potential dangers, keeping Howard and his sister Darlene, Steph's mother, locked inside the house, convinced they would die if they ventured outside. The state eventually took the children away, but Iris continued to harass them throughout their lives, sending disturbing letters filled with obituaries and warnings about death. This revelation shocks Steph, but she remains determined to find answers about her dreams. With help from Aunt Brenda, who secretly shows her where they keep Iris's letters, Steph discovers that her grandmother is still alive. She tracks Iris down to a heavily fortified cabin in the woods, surrounded by warning signs and elaborate security measures designed to keep people out, or perhaps something else. The meeting between Steph and Iris is tense and unsettling. Iris, now elderly and suffering from terminal cancer, recognizes Steph immediately and explains that Steph's dreams are no coincidence. What Steph has been experiencing are echoes of Iris's original premonition from 1968. Iris reveals the truth. When she prevented the Skyview disaster, she disrupted death's design. In the years that followed, death systematically hunted down and killed everyone who was meant to die that night, including her husband Paul. But death's plan didn't stop with the original survivors. Iris explains that by cheating death, these people went on to have children and grandchildren who were never supposed to exist, including Steph, her brother, and their cousins. As the last survivor of the Skyview incident, Iris has spent decades researching death patterns and developing ways to cheat it, documenting everything in a book she tries to give Steph. Initially skeptical, Steph attempts to leave, but Iris follows her outside, determined to make her understand. In a shocking twist of fate, a sudden gust of wind knocks over a weather vane, which impales Iris through her mouth, killing her instantly right before Steph's eyes. This gruesome death confirms everything Iris had been saying and leaves Steph with the realization that death has now set its sights on her family. After Iris's funeral, an unexpected guest appears, Steph and Charlie's long-absent mother, Darlene. Her return creates tension, especially with Steph, who resents her mother for abandoning the family. Despite the awkwardness, Darlene stays for a family barbecue at Uncle Howard's house. During the gathering, Steph studies Iris's book and discovers mentions of someone named JB who apparently found a survivor who defeated death. The barbecue takes a horrific turn when Uncle Howard steps on a piece of glass, loses his balance, and falls directly into the path of a running lawn mower, which brutally kills him. This traumatic event convinces Steph that death is now working its way through her family, just as Iris warned. She tries to explain her theory to the others, but they dismiss her as being paranoid like her grandmother. That night, a chain of events causes a fire at Cousin Eric's tattoo shop. Though the building burns down, Eric survives, protected by his leather jacket. This survival puzzles Steph, as according to the pattern she identified in Iris's book, Eric should have been next to die after Howard. Meanwhile, she and Charlie try to warn their other cousins about the danger, but they remain skeptical until tragedy strikes again. While arguing with Steph about her crazy theories, Cousin Julia is accidentally knocked into a trash can, which rolls into the street just as a garbage truck passes by. The truck picks up the can with Julia inside and crushes her to death in its compactor. This horrific death finally convinces the remaining family members that death is indeed hunting them. A crucial revelation comes when Aunt Brenda confesses that Eric isn't actually Uncle Howard's biological son, but the result of an affair she had years ago. This explains why Eric survived the fire. Death was following the correct bloodline order after all. According to the new understanding, Bobby is next, followed by Darlene, then Steph, and finally Charlie. Desperate for answers, Steph, Charlie, Bobby, and Darlene decide to track down the mysterious JB mentioned in Iris's book. They discover JB is William John Bloodworth, who works at a hospital called Hope River. When they meet him, Bloodworth reveals he was a child at the Skyview Tower the night of Iris's Premonition. His mother was a singer performing there, and he wasn't supposed to be present. He was the last person to die in Iris's vision, and she saved him along with everyone else. Bloodworth, now terminally ill himself, explains there are only two ways to defeat death: by killing someone and taking their remaining lifespan, or by dying and being resuscitated, truly dying and coming back to life. He tells them he's tired of helping people cheat death and is now ready to face his own fate. With this knowledge, Eric hatches a desperate plan to save his brother Bobby, who's next on death's list. He gives Bobby food containing peanuts, knowing Bobby has a severe allergy, intending to let him have an allergic reaction and then revive him with an epinephrine autoinjector. However, the plan goes horribly wrong when they try to execute it in an MRI room at the hospital. The machine activates unexpectedly, ripping out Eric's piercings and crushing him against the machine, killing him instantly. Moments later, a vending machine malfunctions, and its spring mechanism impales Bobby through the head. Realizing they're running out of time, Steph, Charlie, and Darlene decide their only hope is to reach Iris's cabin, where she managed to survive for decades by understanding and anticipating death patterns. As they drive to the cabin in Darlene's RV, a terrible accident occurs. The vehicle crashes, and Steph becomes trapped by her seatbelt as water begins to fill the cabin. Darlene manages to save Charlie first, then returns for Steph despite knowing she's next on death's list. In a heart-wrenching moment of sacrifice, Darlene helps Charlie break the window to reach Steph just before a falling lamp post bisects Darlene, killing her instantly. Charlie pulls Steph from the sinking vehicle and performs CPR when he finds she's not breathing. He successfully resuscitates her, and they believe they've broken death's chain by having Steph technically die and come back. A week later, at Charlie's high school graduation, everything seems to have returned to normal. The siblings are beginning to heal from their trauma and are planning their futures. However, during a conversation with Charlie's girlfriend's father, who happens to be a doctor, they make a devastating realization. Steph was never actually dead when Charlie resuscitated her. She was just unconscious. This means death's design wasn't broken after all. As this horrifying truth dawns on them, disaster strikes once more. A nearby train derails, sending massive logs tumbling through the neighborhood. Before they can react, both Steph and Charlie are crushed by the falling logs, killed instantly in the final moments of the film. Death's design completes its cycle, claiming the last of those who were never meant to exist. The film's ending reinforces the franchise's central theme that death cannot be cheated forever. Despite all their efforts, knowledge, and sacrifices, Steph and Charlie couldn't escape their fate. The rules established throughout the series hold true. Death will always find a way to restore the natural order. What makes Final Destination Bloodlines stand out in the franchise is its generational approach to death's design. While previous films focused on immediate survivors of a disaster, this entry explores the idea that death's plan extends to descendants of those who cheated fate. This adds a new layer of tragedy, as Steph, Charlie, and their cousins are essentially paying for their grandmother's actions decades before they were born. The character of Iris represents an interesting parallel to the protagonists of previous Final Destination films. Like Clear Rivers from the original movie, Iris isolates herself in an attempt to control her environment and evade death. However, Iris takes this to the extreme, spending decades in isolation, documenting patterns, and fortifying her cabin. Her paranoia ultimately damaged her relationship with her children, especially Darlene, creating a multi-generational impact beyond just death's design. Darlene's character arc is particularly compelling. Initially portrayed as an absent mother who abandoned her family, we eventually learn that her abandonment stemmed from the same fears that consumed Iris. Growing up with a paranoid mother left deep psychological scars, and when Darlene began seeing danger everywhere for her own children, she made the painful choice to leave rather than subject them to the same fearful upbringing she experienced. Her sacrifice at the end, knowingly going to her death to save her children, represents her final attempt to break the cycle of fear and abandonment that plague her family. The film also continues the franchise's tradition of elaborate, Rube Goldberg-like death sequences. From Howard's lawnmower accident to the hospital deaths of Eric and Bobby, each demise is a carefully orchestrated chain of seemingly random events that culminate in gruesome ends. These sequences maintain the series' balance of horror and dark humor while introducing fresh, unexpected kills that keep viewers on edge. William Bloodworth's appearance provides a satisfying connection to the broader Final Destination mythology. Tony Todd's character, usually a mortician in previous films, has always hinted at knowing more about death's design than he revealed. This installment confirms that suspicion by establishing him as a survivor of the same incident that started the current cycle, explaining his cryptic knowledge throughout the series. His resignation to his fate after years of trying to help others represents the exhaustion that comes with constantly battling an inevitable force. The rules for cheating death receive some new nuances in this film. While previous entries established that new life could break the chain, as in Final Destination 2, Bloodlines focuses more on the actual process of dying and returning. This adds stakes to the resuscitation attempt, as it must be a true death, not merely unconsciousness, to break the cycle. The alternative method, taking someone else's life to gain their remaining years, introduces a moral dimension that previous films only hinted at, forcing characters to consider whether survival justifies murder. The Skyview Tower disaster itself is a worthy addition to the franchise's collection of spectacular opening premonitions. While not as immediately recognizable as a plane crash or highway pileup, the combination of a glass floor shattering, a falling chandelier, and a gas explosion creates a visually striking and terrifying scenario. Setting this premonition in 1968 also allows for period-appropriate details that distinguish it from modern disasters seen in other entries. One of the film's strengths is its exploration of family dynamics under extreme stress. The tension between Steph and her mother, Charlie's attempts to maintain normalcy, Eric's rebellious nature, and the revelation of Brenda's affair all feel like authentic family drama, even before the supernatural elements enter the picture. This grounding in relatable conflicts makes the horror more effective when it arrives, as we've already invested in these characters as people rather than just potential victims. The decision to make the protagonist a college student struggling with academics adds another layer of relatability. Steph's fear of losing her scholarship feels like a genuine concern that many viewers can understand, making her initial dismissal of the dreams more sympathetic. It also creates a contrast between the mundane pressures of student life and the extraordinary supernatural threat she eventually faces. The film's visual style maintains the franchise's tradition of finding horror in everyday settings. From the family barbecue to the high school graduation, ordinary gatherings become sites of potential danger as the audience scans each scene for the items that might become instruments of death. This transforms common spaces into tension-filled environments where anything could be part of death's next elaborate plan. The theme of legacy runs throughout the film, both literally in terms of bloodlines and figuratively regarding what we pass down to future generations. Iris passed down not only her genes, but also her premonitions and paranoia. Darlene, trying to break this cycle, inadvertently created new wounds through abandonment. The question of what we inherit from our ancestors, both biologically and psychologically, becomes central to understanding the character's struggles. Another interesting aspect of the film is its treatment of time. While most Final Destination movies unfold in a compressed time frame, with deaths occurring in quick succession, Bloodlines spans decades in its narrative. This extended timeline emphasizes the patience and inevitability of death. It doesn't matter if it takes weeks or decades. Death will eventually restore the natural order. This adds a cosmic horror element to the proceedings, suggesting that forces beyond human understanding operate on timescales we can barely comprehend. The concept of premonitions receiving a fresh treatment in this film through the idea of inherited visions. Instead of directly experiencing a premonition of her own impending death, Steph dreams of her grandmother's vision from decades earlier. This creates an interesting narrative puzzle for her to solve, as she must first understand the significance of these dreams before she can use them to save herself and others. This approach allows the franchise to maintain its central conceit while providing a new angle on how premonitions might work. The role of documentation and research also evolves in this entry. While previous films showed characters researching mysterious deaths or looking up news stories online, Iris's book represents a more comprehensive attempt to understand death patterns. The detailed notes, newspaper clippings, and personal observations collected over decades demonstrate a level of dedication to cheating death that goes beyond what we've seen before. This suggests that with enough study, death's methods might become somewhat predictable, even if its ultimate victory remains assured. Character development receives substantial attention throughout the film. Steph's journey from skeptical college student to desperate protector of her family shows significant growth, as does Charlie's evolution from carefree teenager to someone willing to make impossible choices to save his sister. Even secondary characters like Eric undergo meaningful arcs, moving from dismissive mockery of Steph's concerns to desperate attempts to save his brother once he accepts the truth. The film's setting, primarily in suburban neighborhoods and a remote cabin, creates a contrast with the more urban or institutional settings of previous entries. This domestic focus reinforces the theme of family, while creating a false sense of safety that makes the intrusion of death's design all the more shocking. The isolation of Iris's cabin, in particular, emphasizes how far someone might go to control their environment in hopes of controlling their fate. Religious and spiritual elements receive subtle treatment throughout the film. References to fate, design, and the natural order hint at larger metaphysical questions without explicitly embracing any particular belief system. This ambiguity allows viewers to interpret death's motivation according to their own worldview, whether as a conscious entity with agency or simply as the manifestation of natural law reasserting itself. The film's tragic ending reinforces the franchise's consistent message about the impossibility of permanently cheating death. Despite all their knowledge, planning, and sacrifices, Steph and Charlie still meet their end through an unexpected accident. This conclusion might seem pessimistic, but it aligns with the series' philosophical outlook. that life is precious precisely because it is finite and that attempting to extend it beyond its natural span only leads to greater suffering. Final Destination Bloodlines successfully modernizes the franchise while honoring its roots. By introducing the concept of generational death and expanding the mythology through William Bloodworth's character, it creates fresh terrain for the series to explore while maintaining the core elements that fans expect. The elaborate death sequences, tension-filled premonitions, and underlying philosophical questions about fate versus free will all receive thoughtful treatment within a framework that feels both familiar and new. For longtime fans of the series, the film offers numerous callbacks and connections that enrich the viewing experience without alienating newcomers. References to previous survivors, recurring visual motifs like shadowy reflections signaling death's presence, and the return of Tony Todd in an expanded role all serve to place this entry firmly within the established universe, while pushing its boundaries in interesting directions. The production design deserves special mention for creating distinctive settings that support the story's themes. Iris's cabin, with its elaborate traps, warning systems, and documented research, becomes a physical manifestation of her paranoia and determination. Similarly, the Skyview Tower's glass dance floor represents the literal thin barrier between life and death, a surface that appears solid but can shatter in an instant, plunging its occupants into the void below. The performances across the board elevate the material beyond typical horror fare. The family dynamics feel authentic, with tensions, alliances, and shared histories informing every interaction. Particularly compelling is the relationship between Steph and Darlene, which evolves from resentment to understanding as they confront the legacy of fear that Iris passed down to them. This emotional core gives weight to the supernatural elements and makes the characters' fates more impactful when death eventually claims them. Final Destination Bloodlines ultimately succeeds by finding a new angle on the franchise's central premise while delivering the elaborate death sequences and philosophical questions that fans have come to expect. By extending death's design across generations and exploring how trauma and fear can shape families, it adds emotional depth to the series' established formula. The film suggests that while we cannot escape death, we might still choose how we face it and what legacy we leave for those who come after us, even if that legacy is simply the courage to live fully in the face of inevitable mortality. In the end, Steph and Charlie's story reminds us of the franchise's enduring message, that death is not just a horrific antagonist, but a natural part of existence. Their struggle against fate may be doomed from the start, but their determination to protect each other and break the cycle of fear that dominated their family for generations gives their journey meaning beyond mere survival. They may not escape death's design, but in facing it together, they reclaim agency over how they live the time they have, however brief it might be.